I am a big fan of Grand Archive, and if you've been following the channel for any amount of time, that should have been pretty obvious. I have been following the game, I've been involved with the game since basically the day any ads went out, even before the Kickstarter launched. I've been in the Discord community, and I have loved so many of the things that this company has done. That said, I absolutely respect that in today's day and age of the TCG industry, there are lots of games out there for people to enjoy, and not every game is for everybody. So when I take my love and passion for the game and I come across a Reddit post like this one, a actually well-written, very thoughtful, very reasoned, totally not a crash out at all. And that comes out of sarcasm. It's not. I found this Reddit post going around that is why this person bounced off of GA. And it made me just want to take my experiences and my thoughts and provide them. But rather than sitting there and writing out a novel on Reddit, I thought I would just record a video and talk to you guys about why I latched onto GA. And I'm basically going to take Yseera's post, and I'm not going to blast it or anything. I just want to take each point and provide my own 2 cents. I think they have a valid point of view, and I want to give mine as well. So without any further ado, let's jump into why I latched on to GA. What's up, everyone? It's Dan with Main Deck, and again, we are back with another Grand Archive video. My voice is almost all the way back. We're getting pretty close here, but I really wanted to do this video. Now, again, I'll post it on the screen here, and feel free to pause the video and read through it yourself, or head over to the Grand Archive subreddit as well if you just want to check out the post there. But this is the post by a user called Yseera, called Why I Bounced Off GA. And again, huge appreciation for Yseera taking the time to write out this post. It clearly took some time. It clearly is thoughtful, well-written, and very kind, honestly, very kind in measures, saying a lot of the good things that GA has, but also why certain things didn't work out for them. So this is absolutely not intended in any way to blast Yseera, and I want to just go ahead and throw out there, if you have comments on the things that I'm saying or things Yseera said, I would actually recommend, I don't want to start a brigade or anything, just head down to the comments here on this video. Let me know what you think about any of Yseera's thoughts or my responses to anything, just so I can take the heat for anything instead of having it go to this random user who just wanted to take the time to share their opinions on things. So let's just go ahead and start at the top here. Hey folks, I spent about 2 months dabbling in GA and engaging with the excellent community, both here and locally, and made the hard decision to quit and wanted some space to talk about it. This is gonna be a long post. I'd love to create some discussion. And if not, I appreciate the space to nitpick regardless. They say GI has a lot of strengths. I think they're fairly obvious. The community is excellent. The pricing is great. Yes, the game has great mechanical bones, 100%. So they want to talk about the small issues that piled up to get them to the point of actually quitting the game, right? Let's talk about point number 1 that they make, which is the cost. So they state that decks have gotten more and more expensive. $200 plus staple playsets, URs and SRs are normal. Budget decks don't really exist. The best you can do is a Sylvie Rico plus $100 on a DG, a Dungeon Guide playset. My locals have great proxy policy, and that's how I got this far, but it's discouraging to know I'll never be able to afford playing in a store championship. So with this very first point, I want to say 100%. I mean, Grand Archive is one of the more expensive games out there. It just simply is. It's a game where it's a tough situation, honestly. The big thing we have to talk about here is the fact that Grand Archive is printing to capacity right now. We have heard from the devs talk multiple times in the past dev streams about how they are printing everything they can with their printer. They've worked really hard and invested in a single printer to print their game to the level that they're happy with, the quality level that they're happy with. So to get our beautiful cards with our, our UV backs and that anti-curling thing that happens on the foils that every game says isn't possible, the textured foils, all of the treatments that they're doing. And now we have things like the looking glass sights and everything. These are things that they've worked really hard hand in hand with their printer to do, and they can't print more. They can't. They're at the point where they can't. So they're printing to capacity and sets are selling. And the difficult part of the conversation about cost is always that, well, it would be incredible to have a world where the set is in such high demand that it's not like a Yu-Gi-Oh set where it goes to at least the last year of Yu-Gi-Oh sets. I'm not trying to just blast Yu-Gi-Oh, but the fact is, as someone who works retail, most of the sets in the last year for Yu-Gi-Oh have gone down to $30 at release for a box, right? Like absurd, not everything, but almost all of them. Very, very absurd. There's just so much stock, so much product out there that stores lose money per set. And so there's that interesting sort of interplay between the producer, the stores who need to make money, and that's why they stock a game, because they're able to make money on it. They're not going to spend money they're not a charity. They're not going to buy product just to sell it at a loss to people. And then the people buying the product who want to pay the least possible and get the most value possible out of their product. So on the one hand, the current state of the games economy is that there are a lot of cards that are very expensive and valuable, and everything that Yseera says here is totally accurate. You want to buy Looking Glass, Cheshire Cats, you want to even just buy Dungeon Guides, Grand Crusaders Ring, you want to buy the new Lost Providence DR. There's just so many expensive cards in the game, and it is pricey to play. On the other hand, when you're buying product, you're getting cards with value. A lot of people I've heard say, why isn't just like Pokemon, where you just, can buy a competitive deck for $25? And that's because nothing in the industry is like Pokemon. Nothing sells the amount of product that gets opened and ripped and put for sale on the online marketplace. Nothing is like Pokemon at all. And it's not really a fair comparison. The fact is, you're either going to have one of two things. Typically, you're going to have a product where very few cards are worth very much, and the product is cheap. Or you're going to have a product where the product is expensive. It means the stores make money, and when the product's cheap, usually the store loses money on that. So the stores are going to be able to make some amount of money selling it because it's got a demand, it's got a price, it's got a value to it. But then on the other hand, your cards are valuable too. And when a game is this small like Grand Archive, it's just kind of like an unavoidable thing. It's going to be one of those two. And I would say, thankfully, we're on the side where stores do want to stock it. But the flip side, the double-edged sword, is that it's an expensive game to play. So I don't have like you're wrong about this one. Yeah, I think you're right. And it's unfortunate. I'm really glad your locals have a welcoming proxy policy. Our locals is exactly the same way. I run locals where I allow people to proxy cards in until we get to the store champs level and above. And that has allowed people to get in and play the game and test decks and find things they like before they start investing money. And that's really, I feel like that's the best I can do right now, is just try to make sure that you can at least make the best decisions possible with your money, given that you're going to have to spend a decent amount to play. And I encourage other people to treat their locals similarly and work with each other. And that's why Grand Archives Index has a print and play feature on it. So you can try everything out and then decide if you want to buy those Cheshire Cats. And the other flip side, I guess, is just that because everything's expensive, usually the value retains pretty decently on a lot of cards. There have been only a few that have been like pretty expensive and gotten pretty cheap. A lot of the time, the value maintains pretty well on cards. So that's at least a good thing as well. Let's move to the next one. Parasitic Design. With the unique champions of GAR selling point, more and more cards are becoming champion locked. Just look at how many cards are Sheen based. The upcoming Phantom Monarch set pushes the game into being all about the new hotness. If you're a Rye fan, for example, you cry looking at PTM spoilers. Slime players get a single slime and hope it's enough. Personally, I wish they lean more into class bonuses than champion bonuses. So here I have a very different opinion of this. I actually think the champion design in Grand Archive is one of its greatest strengths. And I think every set is full of surprisingly high amount of support, given that the set has nothing to do with certain champions. Rye has some interesting new cards, both for wind and fire, that allows some fun suppress shenanigans in wind, or some crazy empower shenanigans in fire if Rye wants to go those routes. Those are things that are there, and I think that's really cool that these champions are still getting kind of neat little tricks, even when it's not, their time to shine. when it comes down to it, every game is going to be designed differently. And when you design a class-based game, and so like Flesh and Blood is a similar game to this as well, you have to make a choice between I'm going to just hone in and fully support only these characters, only these archetypes each set, or I'm going to like try to support everything as much as possible. When you try to put an even amount, so let's say in Fandom Monarchs, there's the same amount of Rye support as there is for a newer champion, CL support, Diana support, something from Distorted Reflections, right? If you do that, then you're going to end up with your new champions don't reach the same level of playability as your old ones until multiple sets later, or they just never can catch up to them based on a design unless you really ramp up the power. You power creep the heck out of these new champions, right? So instead, what GA does is I think the right choice, which is they really support their new champions. So in Distorted Reflections into Phantom Monarchs, CL and Diana have a ton of support. In Phantom Monarchs, Alice in both forms has a bunch of support in addition to continuing to support CL and Diana primarily, and then the smattering of other things like Gun Diana, Rye, Sylvie is another good example, right? These champions are, this way you're at least focusing a lot of your support on the champions who need to get more cards, but still putting a smattering of things that can spice up or totally change the playability of older decks as well. And I personally, like for my taste, I think that's the best of all worlds because it allows those new champion designs, these really, really intricate, interesting designs, like we've seen Aetherwing Diana, for example, gives them an opportunity to shine and become playable. And we're looking at Phantom Monarchs now, and we're like, Astro Diana is like kind of there now. She got what she needed. And I don't know if she would have if the amount of support had to be spread so much for other champions. And so I guess that's what I think. I think it's a good system, the current design system. I do think also with the Capstone set with Radiant Origin next set, which is supposed to support all 7 champions, all advanced elements, everything, maybe more evenly, not totally sure yet. But maybe that's kind of the answer that we're looking for, is like we would just widen our lens a little bit, look a little farther, and then we do get kind of that set that we're looking for. I wouldn't necessarily say the design being particularly parasitic is as much of an issue here because of the class-based design and it's the willingness to try to get champs to be up to speed with other ones. And if you just look at the results of Ascents and you see that Lorraine has won more Ascents this season than anyone else, well, I don't know. It can't be like that power crept, right? So the next thing we have is complexity creep. I love how GA respects your intelligence, but the amount of text on some cards is starting to spiral out of control. The upcoming Merlin Recollection adds so much game state tracking, it makes MTG's dungeons look tame. Another example is the newly announced proxy card that generates a Rile the Abyss. Good luck explaining that to a new character, or excuse me, a new player. The awkward multiplayer focused wording doesn't help. Okay. So I would say overall, Grand Archive had a really big complexity creep jump in ALC. But I, at least my 2 cents, I think the simulation that you got out of that from adding in guns, adding in bullets, adding in, the shenanigans with Astra, adding in tokens, all of that stuff. I think the way that impacted our ability to get a character fantasy, a flavor fantasy out of these character designs was completely worth it. And I continue to feel that way about every new champion design. I don't think that the game state tracking in the Merlin Recollection deck is much of a problem at all. Now, am I completely just blind to it at this point because I've played so much Grand Archive? That might be the case. But I've also taught the game to a lot of new players. And of course, I start at the beginning, right? We start with the basic Lorraine demo deck and say, this is a warrior, this is what it does. But I find in my explanations of different champions, the simulation tends to win out. Once players get, that you load the bullet into the gun and then you shoot the bullet out, then they tend to accept, in my experience, the intent nonsense, rules nonsense that kind of makes it all work. That all tends to just kind of wash away because they get it, they get what's going on, they like what's going on, they like that it went for the simulation. And I feel the same way about the Merlin Recollection deck. There is, once you break down the mastery in that deck into, this is 2 ways to get Sheen. You either kill an ally or you hit their champion, and then you take its Sheen. I feel like that gets rid of a lot of the clunkiness and confusion. You just have to explain, this is just how she gets sheen. It's based on what she hits, which is how I tried to explain it in the video as well, to try and make that a little easier for people to understand. Now, that said, my experience, everyone else's experience are not indicative of everyone else's experiences, right? So we can't just simply take our experience and say, well, I had an easy time, so you should have an easy time as well. And I do respect that Grand Archive is not the simplest game in the world to play. In fact, I'm very impressed when people tell me, and I've talked to a few people who said this, they said this is their first TCG. Like, wow, that takes a little bit of trial by fire to get through and get used to. But that said, it is a number of people's first TCG. And so it's not totally out of the question to explain. Generates a Rile of the Abyss means that you take a Rile of the Abyss card and put it into your memory. Oh, but I thought I saw that card on the ban list. Yeah, but it's banned to put in your deck list, not to generate. And I feel like I've explained it, right? I think that did the trick. So I don't think it's as big of an issue here as Yseera feels it is, but your mileage may vary, and let me know in the comments down below how you feel. All right, consistency. This one I promise will be a little faster than the others. Huge 60 card deck, no built-in mulligan, creates a very high level of variance. This is to taste, but it felt like so many games came down to drawing your outs while hoping your opponent didn't draw their major combo and interaction pieces. I'm aware there's a lot of skill in playing around that variance, but at the end of the day, games where I drew a dungeon guide felt like night and day from games where I didn't. I'll admit Serene Spirit's an interesting way to tackle this, but it shouldn't be a double-digit priced solution. I have played and watched enough high-level GA to know that consistency is not the issue in the game. At least in the way I see things play out, it adds the interesting variance, absolutely, which Yseera does say here. It adds variance, and it's a taste thing for sure. But I have seen so many of the best players in the game fight out of bad variance constantly that I have a hard time agreeing with someone that says, oh, well, it just comes down to variance at the end of the day, because it just absolutely doesn't at all at so many levels of the game. It's so difficult for me to agree with something like that here. So I simply can't. Is there variance? Yes. Is Dungeon Guide part of the fabric of the game's variance in the same way that lands are part of the fabrics of Magic's variance? Absolutely, for level 3 decks. But of course, you have the option to not do that. You have the option to play a Serene Spirit, which I agree should be there should be cheaper options available. I'm not going to argue that one at all. But you have the option to play a Serene Spirit. You can play a Fortuitous or Fragmented Spirit if you want to as well, which are possibly, I think those are cheaper options. Check them prices in a little bit, but those are options too. Serene Spirit tends to be maybe a little more useful, so I get it. And maybe it'd be nice to have a reprint of some of that stuff, reprint of Dungeon Guide, reprint of Grand Crusaders. I totally agree. But I think what GA does that I really like is it puts agency in players' hands for a lot of things. You have the agency to choose how you want to approach the start of the game. You have the agency to choose how you're going to try and play out, what cards you're going to put down, what cards you're going to hold up, what cards you're going to pretend to have. I can't tell you how many times I have played out of situations by just not playing cards because my opponent has to now play around me, even though I don't have the out in hand. I quote Ascent Utrecht against Glenny Boy every time. Glenny Boy had every right to win that game well before I had the opportunity to win it. And he had to play around me, playing slowly, playing as if I had answers. There is so much agency in the game that I don't think consistency is a big issue, at least for me. And just for one last thing, the material deck is the feature of Grand Archive that I might love the most. It is unique, very unique. Very few TCGs do anything even close to the material deck. And it's what allows you to have consistent answers to problematic cards, at least temporary ones, hurdles you can put in front of your opponent while you enact your own game plan that you don't have to draw out of your deck, that you don't just have a chance of not seeing. I think it's one of the strongest mechanics in the game and is severely underutilized by players who are still kind of starting to figure the game out. And access to that material deck, I think, massively increases the game's consistency every game you play. All right, next one, Polarized Matchups. 30% or lower win rates in some matchups. Going up to a vet after a loss for advice and being told if they drew both Seiryuu's commands, you just lose, is so demotivating. I remember a True Champion Gaming podcast where they mentioned 2 members of the same team brought the same deck and one did well because they dodged their bad matchups. This is another to taste thing. The game heavily prioritizes reading the meta and constructing a highly tuned deck, which is an important skill, but I prefer to have more play into my bad matchups. So I'm going to start with putting up the Fractal of Insight matchup matrix for the last metagame, and you'll see there are almost no 30% or worse matchups in this spread. There are some that are close, but there are almost none that are 30 or worse, and there are a lot that just hover in those 40 to 60 range, 40, 30, not even 35, 45 to 65. I mean, like, there are a lot of decks here that have a lot of play into anything. So the thing that I think is really interesting is that Yseera has played for the last 2 months, and the last 2 months of the game have been the most like diverse open metagame in Grand Archive's history. They said the game heavily prioritizes reading the meta and constructing a highly tuned deck. But in the last metagame, a lot of players, high-level players' advice is just to get really good at a deck, prep for your worst matchups, and try to win out into everything. And we saw a pretty diverse spread of decks other than water being lowly represented at a lot of these top cuts. I mean, Seiryuu, Ciel, Lorraine, Merlin, Razorgale, Water Diana, Wind Wake Up, Fire Aggro. Like, we have seen a lot of very playable decks that are topping Ascents, making it all the way. And it's really hard, especially when a lot of those players are the best players in the game that are doing it consistently, for me to think that it really is that much about polarized matchups in the last metagame. Like, definitely, like, there's some degree when the metagame is so open, there's some degree of like, well, I just hope I don't hit those worst matchups throughout the event. But I look at main deck Alex, took second at the Niagara Falls Ascent. He's playing Seiryuu, matched into Tristan a lot. And a lot of players who were on Tristan were there just because they liked the matchup into Seiryuu, but was just able to take those wins. And I know it's given one of these points a little bit, I probably shouldn't be bringing up Seiryuu exactly as the issue, or as an example of a great deck in the metagame right now, because it maybe is the best deck right now in the metagame. But I think this one's another tough one too, because it's fine if you don't like how the matchup matrix kind of plays out, how the matchups play out. But again, there's just so much play and tech you can do into so many different matchups. And when I look at the raw numbers here on Fractal, they don't really line up with what's being said. So this is another one where I do have to just kind of disagree. I don't think the matchups are as polarized, and I think skill is often a huge factor in a lot of these matchups. Now, while I definitely do think the skill input in the game has a big impact on your experience, and this matrix shows that things aren't as polarized as Yseera is sort of insinuating here, that said, they're not wrong. There are matchups that are more polarized, that are more favorable. You look at Seiryuu versus Wind Arasana. That's a very tough go for Arasana if anything goes Seiryuu's way. But frankly, in the design of the game, that is seen more as a feature than a bug. Now, it might not be a feature that appeals to you, and in that case, Yseera is 100% correct here. If they don't like the feature of matchups sometimes being more polarized, then there are other games, there are other options. Now, in my experience, other games that are less polarized, that have more even designs where you can kind of take any deck or any reasonably recent deck and play it against anything and have a good shot to win the game still, they tend to have some drawbacks. That kind of design is typically accompanied by things like catch-up mechanisms, things like random chance impacting the outcome too highly, like trigger checks, that kind of stuff. And that tends to be really in the domain of more like Japanese or East Asian designed TCGs. And Grand Archive from the inception was a Western style game design. And part and parcel of that game design is typically an understanding that there are some things you can do in the game, some decks you can bring that are not going to have, they're going to impact your chances to win massively in a negative direction. And it's sort of a personal responsibility, like, well, you know, this is a competitive game. There are competitive decks, there are competitive cards, and it comes hand in hand with the design, and absolutely not going to appeal to everybody. For my 2 cents, and we'll talk about this a lot more in the next section, I tend to find that design that is overly balanced as far as trying to make everything play into everything else tends to give up design that's fun and interesting, and also tends to give up in some ways actual metagaming, actual tech, actual good matchups, and being able to set yourself up to have good matchups in an event. So Western style games like that, I think, are more suited generally to competitive minded players. That's not to say there aren't going to be casual Grand Archive players, and definitely hold off for the announcement of the Pantheon format, where I think I mentioned multiplayer rules text earlier, certainly might be coming to play as well. We still don't have information on that, but everyone very much speculates that it's going to be a big multiplayer casual format with some special rules. And when that all hits, I think that'll make more sense. I think casual audiences will have a new outlet to explore. It's not that you can't play it casually right now, but yeah, definitely you're going to take some polarized matchups against competitive players. It's going to be tough, but it is an incredible game for people who are competitively minded and who do want to play into matchups that are a little more polarized, because it's understood that that's sort of a cost for the competitive benefits that you get in the gameplay experience. So that's why this doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I do think it's a feature. I do like it a lot. And I do think skill does play a ton into it as well. All right, next one, super powerful silver bullets. Hate cards aren't slight edges in this game. They can single-handedly crush decks you teched against. This makes polarized matchups worse, as not all silver bullets are equal. Censor allows you to just completely shut down graveyard decks using a card from your material deck, while your opponent has to dig into their inconsistent main deck for an answer like Reduce to Ash. Some of the most powerful decks are powerful because there's no material deck silver bullet that can shut them down. So Grand Archive is a very punishing game. It's a competitive game with a very competitive mindset. And it means that it doesn't want to just apply a soft answer and say, well, make it a little harder for you now. It says, well, if you want to tech the answer, you're going to tech the answer. And the answer is going to be an answer and not just a stumbling block, right? And I think there's certainly a taste thing here, right? There's a lot of TCGs that just want to apply light stumbling blocks and give everybody a chance to get back into the game and have a good time. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying that style of play. And maybe that's something that Yseera likes a little more, and this is a core reason why they bounced off of the game. But Grand Archive is a cutthroat TCG for players who like it when their powerful cards do powerful things. I think Censor of Wrestle Pieces and Reduced Ash is a very interesting set of cards to bring up, because Censor of Wrestle Piece is in the format and it's some of the best decks in the format, and it never stopped Lorraine from taking a sense, or Merlin from taking games. Censor is a card that is actually more of a stumbling block than a lot of the hard answers in the game are hard answers to things. Because when Censor's out, you just don't use float. You just level like normal and play the game. And what your opponent had to do was spend a materialize phase to use that. And I do feel like this paragraph is written a little bit like spending materialize phase is just a minor cost, when the materialize phase is probably the most important phase you have every single turn, and the winners of Ascents are perfectly using their materialize phases every single turn. And when you have to take a turn off to Censor and they do just have the Reduce, if they do, you get so punished because you took half of their turn, which wasn't as important as your materialize phase. And that, I think, makes that just, it's a weird, I think it's a weird take. I'd rather we talk about something like Verican Acolyte hitting Aquamirage Whisper, right? If the Acolyte hits the Whisper against Diana, that can be quite a stumble for Diana. If you want to punish Diana, you can absolutely destroy what she's doing, right? Or even just like fracturize onto Gun Diana or various sword-based champions or anything like that, right? There's like some really, really strong tech in the game. But that tech always has counter tech, right? And that tech being part of the game hasn't stopped some of those champions from winning tournaments anyway. The fact that powerful tech exists doesn't change the fact that it needs to exist and be powerful, because the cards it's answering are inherently extremely powerful also. So the reason we have to have things like ensnaring fumes is because otherwise Seiryuu is actually like an unstoppable deck, right? You need to have cards like fumes or tempest so that some of these decks can get into that action and deal with it. It's just basically a design philosophy where if we decide to make cards powerful and fun, then we have to equally decide to make answers to them powerful. And inherently, if your really powerful card is fun, your opponent answering it is going to feel not fun. And the final piece of the puzzle to making this all make sense is that the fact that we have polarized matchups, powerful cards, cards that win games, cards that deal hard with cards that win games, is that we end up creating a tapestry, a fabric of a metagame that shifts and changes and allows interesting choices. You might bring Seiryuu to an event and go up against a bunch of decks that are teched against it, so Seiryuu maybe ended up not being a good pick for that event, or maybe you did truly just get unlucky in your matchup spread. That can happen as well. But when you look at the wider metagame, those decks that are teching to answer Seiryuu should, in theory, be worse against other decks and then end up getting punished because they teched for that deck instead of others. And it creates an evolving metagame event to event where competitive players can get in and track and see, Seiryuu was really hardly answered in the last ascent, so in this ascent, nobody brought it. So maybe in this next one, it's actually going to be a good choice because people have started to take the tech out of their deck, or everybody's starting to play this deck to answer this new thing, and this is actually really good into it. For competitive-minded players, that is one of the ultimate grails, to be able to chase that, to be able to build and tech and prep, and that is something that Grand Archive tends to have in spades, and that's what really, really makes it fun. That wider lens is not something everybody appreciates. So Yseera, I get it. If that's not something that you want to look at the game from, or you enjoy looking at the game from in that perspective, then absolutely look around, see if there's something that is a better fit for you. But for me, I get so pumped up and so excited helping the team, working towards figuring out what's the list to bring, what's the ultimate tech, what's everybody ready to face, what's everybody ready to play. And I think there are a lot of competitive card game players out there who can really attach to that concept and really enjoy and are able to look at the metagame from that wider lens and understand every deck's kind of position in it and how it can shift event to event. So absolutely cool. Chalk this down to taste, not liking how powerful those cards are, but again, I'll go back, I'll look at the percentages, I'll talk about the best players in the game and their consistency, and just say that I don't think it always just comes down to a random luck of the draw and any of that stuff. You play enough, you get skilled, you play around things, you play answers to things, you sideboard well, you have redundancy built into your deck, or you just choose correctly to play through the sensor instead of wishing you had the answer and then trying to draw it or something. I think there are a lot of answers to your opponent having answers to your stuff that are just baked into the framework and the fabric of the game. And that's one of the things that I love about it. And every time I cast an event, it gets me so excited about what I'm witnessing. All right, and then our last thought here, Wind Seiryuu. Look, guys, this deck is just bull. It just is. I'm not saying it's unbeatable or tier 0, but I've never seen a deck that can be so flexible based on the cards they draw. The deck can level 3 rush you, ally tempo you, card draw value, arcane blast OTK you, innervate agility into free level 3 outlast you, and also use a material deck card to reload after running low on resources. Yeah, the deck is probably the best one in the format. I do think there's always going to be a best deck in the format, and Seiryuu is super flexible, super powerful, really good under skilled players, harder to play than people want to give it credit for. Obviously, the turbo lines are really obvious, We've all seen them a million times, but it's playing when you don't have that stuff. It's playing out of it. It's playing into hate really well. The Seiryuu players that I play against, players like main deck Alex, main deck Braden, these players have really tested my ability to try to answer their deck, even when I'm playing super good answers to it. It's a deck that we've seen destroy a lot of people. We've also seen some pretty bad trouncing of the deck when the answers are available as well. I don't know what to say. I mean, in the metagame right now, I get, again, with 2 months of experience, I get really being frustrated with this deck. We go back to Fractals, we go back to Watermill, we go back to Slimes during its heyday. We go back to Fire Merlin during its heyday as well. Fire Rye, if you guys weren't in the trenches in set 2 with Fire Rye before we banned Reckless Conversion, I don't know if you guys realize like how unanswerable that was. It was pretty scary. They're always best decks, and it's part of the fabric of the game's, I guess, tapestry, right? And there are always gonna be best decks. If it's not your thing, that's cool. I get it. I still want to thank you, Yseera, for providing this commentary, stuff for people to think about, stuff for me to respond to, and provide my own opinions. A lot of these points, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're off base at all, but I do think there's some taste to it. And I do think on some of them, I do have a little bit of pushback, and on other things, I think it's like with the cost, it's a double-edged sword kind of situation. And it's just an unfortunate reality of the outcome of things. But what I want to hear is what you all think about my thoughts, about Yseera's thoughts. Let's have a nice discussion. Be polite, be friendly, respect that there are people on the other side that you're responding to. Let me know down below what you think about Grand Archive, why you stuck with it, why you bounced off of it. And no hate whatsoever, please, because we don't want that here on Main Deck. Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe for more Grand Archive, Star Wars Unlimited, and other content. And we'll see you all in the next one.